College transition for students with disabilities. What to expect in the Disability Services intake meeting when students register for college accommodations.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Hamblett. I write about and make presentations on preparing students with disabilities for successful college transition. Joining me today is my friend and colleague Marvin Williams, who is Director of Disability Resource Services at Stanislaus State in California. I asked Marvin to join me today because I know that students register with the Disability Services Office and often have to attend what's commonly called an intake meeting. And I think it's really important to try to demystify this meeting and provide some information so that students can feel a little bit less concerned about that meeting and feel a little more confident going into it. And also so that parents can understand that meeting and their possible role in it. So Marvin, thank you for joining me today. Can
Oh,
you
thank you
tell
for
me,
having me.
thank you, why do disability services offices have intake meetings?
That's a very good question. So the intake meeting is a way that we get to know who the student is and the way that we get to understand a little more about what the student understands about their disability. So during the application process, we do take in a lot of paperwork and we read that. But what that is other people talking about the impact of the student's disability on the student. We need some time to be able to talk with the student and find out from them how the disability impacts them. What types of supports maybe have they've used in the past, what has worked, what hasn't worked, because also what hasn't worked is important. There's no need to go ahead and provide an accommodation that either is not useful or is not effective. One of the things that we're supposed to do with the accommodations are not only supposed to be reasonable, but they're also supposed to be effective. So we want to make sure that they're as effective as possible. So the intake meeting is a chance for us to really get to know who the student is, really get to have a good idea of how the student's disability impacts them, ideas about their functional limitations as they understand them and how those might manifest. And really just to again, have a better idea of the student as a person as opposed to just a bunch of information that's on a page.
That's really helpful. So what kinds of questions might you ask a student in an intake meeting?
So one of the things that I always ask is first, just I'll find out from them what they were expecting of the meeting, what they were thinking, and I try to put up front, do they have questions, and I lay out what the layout of the meeting is going to be. So usually, I'll start off with something as simple as, well, how are you doing? How is your day going? How are classes going so far? If the semester's already started or if the semester hasn't, what do they look forward to? Are they nervous about anything, afraid of anything? Just to kind of get that out of the way. That's always there. People might think it's not, it's always there unless you have someone, even for some of my juniors and seniors, it can be there. So it's trying to make sure that that's out of the way and we can really relax and we can get into what's effectively a conversation. But we'll ask about the student's disability, what they understand about it, what they know about it. We'll also ask how does it affect them? So sometimes, they'll understand the idea of functional limitations. So we'll often explain that too, explain what a functional limitation is, to get an idea of just what's going on. And then we'll also ask about like previous things that might have been given previous accommodations. So if you're in a high school and maybe you had testing accommodations, well, what did that look like? And how did that work? And what did you have to do for that, for your part, to get an understanding of what their understanding is, what their expectation is. And then we also ask questions about like about with high school, did anyone talk with you about making this transition to college? Did anyone talk to you about what this process is like, how it's maybe different from an IEP meeting, how the services that you get are going to be different from what you got in high school? And differences in the law, things like that. We try not to get too dense in it, but we do like to make sure that they understand that things are different and that as folks often have, I see a lot on IEPs where students have open book, open note, and untimed tests, how usually that's not that's kind of a no-go in some situations, but we'll take a look at it, but then also making sure that we have good support, good documentation and good support for requests like that. We also will ask the student about, just, I like to ask what subjects do they like and why? What subjects do they not like and why? Because if you have a preference, disability aside, we all have different things that we like. So I could be a history nerd, or I could be a math nerd. If those are the things that I like, then because I like them, I will most likely do better in them because I've got an interest in them. It's going to be easier for me to hold my interest with those topics. So if it's something that I don't like, well, then it's going to be harder for me to be able to go through, possibly could be harder for me to be able to be successful, because it's not going to necessarily hold my interest. Add to that mix a disability, and that can make it even more difficult. So we like to try to find out what subjects they like and why, what subjects they don't like and why. We'll ask the all-important question of, well, what's your major? And do you know why that's your major? Why are you studying what you're studying? All of those things are important to try to paint really that picture of who the individual is. Because in trying to come up with what accommodations are going to be effective as well as reasonable, we need to have that good idea of who the individual is, the skills that they have, how are they going to be able to study, how do they study, all of those things. So what I like to do is I'll ask questions, and then oftentimes those questions will lead me to other questions, or the answers to those questions will lead me to other questions. So it's a lot of questions, a lot of answers, but we try to make it very relaxed, very laid back.
So your what you've just said also makes me ask some questions too. And one of the things that I've seen, and for those who are watching this video, watch my video where I go through a website for a disability services office and show you how to find the registration process. And I found that particular school's registration form, and one of the things it asked, and that you just alluded to, is choice of major. Now, if a student is starting college and doesn't know what their major is that okay? What should students know about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. What people don't understand is that students will change their major several times before they finally settle on something. And it's usually because they might have an idea of what they want to do in terms of a field, but there might be different ways to get there. I take a look at it as careers are like cities, and the degree paths are like roads leading to the cities. There's more than just one. So it's just a matter of what path you take to get there. I had one student who wanted to be a magazine editor. And so she was going through with an English major and didn't realize that the School of Communications offered the communications department offered a degree with classes and things that seemed to be more towards her liking and would still allow her to go towards that. So yeah, and universities, we expect you to come through, and I can't remember what the number of times is. I think it might be 2 to 3, might be more than that students will actually change their major before they settle and graduate. The first, your freshman year or your first year in college, your first couple of years, that's why you're taking a lot of general ed, because we expect you to do some changing, and these are classes that are similar across all. So we don't expect you to know particularly. For students with disabilities, this is where we'll also ask where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. If you have pretty bad dyscalculia, so math-related disability, yet you might say, I want to be a physicist. Well, physics is going to have a whole lot of math in it. Are you sure? And that's where we'll ask questions. Okay, well, what is it about physics that you like? Mm-hmm. And then we'll ask about the math. Well, what about the math? And I've had some students say, well, can't I take a note card in for everything? And that's where we'll say, well, we can't say yes, we need to look on a class by class basis and see if that would be considered, perhaps a fundamental alteration or change the essential elements of the class. Because accommodations can't do that. That's another thing that's different between K-12 and higher education, is that the accommodations that we do in higher education can't change the essential elements of a class, but in K-12 they can change the essential elements if it's going to mean student success. Because as you know, and as you've said many times in other presentations I've heard, is that in K-12 the main thing that we're looking for is student success, and yet higher education, I even go farther to say higher education and in the work world, it's all about providing access. And there's a big difference between being successful at something and having access to something, where when you have access, the arbiter of success at that point is the student.
Right. Thank you. That's really helpful. So what I'm hearing you say, to summarize, is if students have a major, the intake meeting can be a good time to talk about that a little bit and to talk about the accommodations that they're seeking, and how that might or might not apply in their desired field of study. But also, if they're filling out the form and they're coming to this intake meeting and they're not sure, that they don't have to just choose a major just for the purposes of registering with our office, right?
Right. We don't require a person to be registered. My campus, we don't require a person to be registered for my office with a major. But then on our campus, like just about every campus, there is a major code of undeclared.
Okay.
There's a reason why we have undeclared, because we know students are going to come in not knowing what they want. So
okay. So I guess one of the other questions I would have is, you talked about asking students about what their functional limitation is, and what accommodations they're seeking, and what you're also offering information. But I guess sometimes folks worry that in a meeting, they're going to say the wrong thing. Is there something a student could say in a meeting that would somehow interfere with their ability to get accommodations? Or what happens, if they don't know what accommodations they're seeking? So I guess that's
no, say that there's really a wrong thing at all. I think that the best thing you can do is just come to the meeting, be your authentic self. If you don't understand a question, then just let us know that you don't understand a question, and we'll do what we can to help either rephrase the question or ask different ones that can help us get to the information. All that we're trying to do is just gather the information to have a better understanding of what's going on. There really isn't anything wrong. What I would say is be careful of having the expectation of certain accommodations that you might have had in high school, because there's no guarantee that you're going to get those accommodations in college. The law that sets up IDEA, which sets up the IEP for K-12, is only valid for K-12. It's not valid for higher education. It's not valid for the workplace. So, and I know that they talk about students can have services up until they're 22. That's still within the K-12 system. So the biggest thing is just really understanding that this is a whole different ballgame, that accommodations may change. And if you don't know if your accommodations help, how they may have helped, then be very honest and say that. We're here to help. And the more information we have, the easier it is to be able to help. So we need to know what's effective, not necessarily from what other people think is effective, but from what you say is effective. So we really need that feedback. And during the meeting, I would say there's no wrong answer. There are no right or wrong answers. There are just your answers.
Oh, I like that. And so I think what's important too is, with more than 4,000 colleges in the country, what might be approved at one school might not be elsewhere, but the same is true of the other direction. And so students should ask for whatever they want. And it's always possible that they'll get it. So asking for something that your particular school won't offer or can't offer for any reason doesn't mean also that the student gets nothing, right? That asking for something that isn't approved doesn't wipe everything out. I think it's important for families to know.
And we also try to make sure that if we do have to deny accommodation, we'll explain why we're denying it,
Mhm.
and we will offer an alternative. But then also, every school should have a process for appealing an
Mhm.
accommodation denial. So if it's something to where you really feel like you have to have that, then you can go through, you can appeal the decision, and then that takes you through whatever process that the campus has set up for being able to look at that denial. And sometimes it can be overturned, sometimes it can be upheld. And campuses have grievance procedures where students can go through and take that through. But campuses should always be offering alternatives if they can't. The one example I give is on-campus transportation. If we have kind of a bit of a vast campus, and we do have some individuals who can't walk, all the way across campus to another building in time to make it for a class. So we'll give them a ride in one of our electric carts. And if a student were to come to me and say, Marvin, I need on-campus transportation, but I have to have a diamond encrusted Bugatti, I can't, I would deny the Bugatti, but I would offer my electric cart because I can still get you to your class. We might not be rolling in style the way that you might like to, but if you would like to bling out your sunglasses and your face covering, you can certainly do that. I'll make sure that our drivers have their glasses, and you're responsible for providing your own music. So if you want to roll in style with some good tunes, and you can do that. But the Bugatti we couldn't do. So we try to make sure that you still have, depending on what the need is. That's where the functional limitation, understanding that, is so important. Uh, if we can provide an accommodation that will meet that need, then we will do that.
Okay, that's good to know. So often when students are coming to college with a disability, behind them are parents who have spent years advocating for and supporting their students. And, they obviously want to continue to support their students to the best of their ability, even through this transition. So when it comes particularly to this intake meeting,
Mhm.
is there a role for parents? And if so, how should they see themselves in participating?
Excellent question. I'm glad that you asked this. I would say the first, the way not to participate is, if I'm asking your child a question, your student a question, please let your student answer, even if it takes a little bit. Uh, please please free them to be able to provide those answers. Please don't answer for them.
Why is
Because,
that so important?
well, so we're starting to get to the point now to where students need to be able to do some self-advocacy. They need to be able to, at the very least, you should be able to tell me how your disability is impacting you.
Mhm.
If you don't know, then tell me that you don't know. And that lets me ask different ways, because uh, I'll ask different questions and try different ways to try to get the answer from you, because what you tell me as you're answering the question, I'm also paying attention to how you're answering it. If you have a processing disorder and I see that you have a processing disorder, and if I'm seeing the processing disorder coming through, or
Mhm.
if it's hinted at but not thoroughly there and I'm seeing it coming through, that's letting me know more about it. So again, like how I said earlier, the questions that I ask and how they're answered will lead to other questions. It's the same type of thing. So when the parents are there, I would say the best thing a parent can do is make sure your student is as relaxed as possible going in, and make sure that they know that you're not going to be the one to answer, that they're going to be the one to answer. Also make sure that your student understands that, again, there's no right or wrong answer, there's just their answer.
Mhm.
Uh, Parents can be extremely valuable as historians.
Oh,
So when
sure.
I ask about what high school was like, what the accommodations were like in high school, sometimes I'll hear, well, it was hard. And like, that was it. Okay, well, what was hard about it? "Oh,
Mhm.
I don't know." And that's where the parents might say, well, what about your math class? Oh, I hated math. Okay, why did you hate math? So little things like that, that's great. More as like a coach,
Mhm.
as opposed to um, the, it's advocacy through coaching instead of advocacy through speaking for.
Mhm. And of course, this all comes with the caveat that parents can only participate in this meeting if their students give permission.
That's correct. So I'll ask if the parent's coming back. I'll call the student back for a meeting, and the parent will start to get up and go with them. And I'll stop and I'll introduce myself to the student, shake the student's hand, and ask if this is their parent or who they brought with them today. And then I will ask if the student would like for the person to be present in the meeting. Tell them they have every right for them not to be. We can just have a private conversation if they'd like. So we can do that. And it's totally up to the student if they want the person to come back or not. I've had some students say, well, I can do this alone. And I've had some parents say, you can do this alone, which is, it's always great. And I always tell the student, if you want, if we need to stop and, bring the person in, we can. But we try to do that so that we're also, there's another method to our madness. We're trying to get the student ready for when they have to do this and the parents won't be there. Imagine going to your job and having to have your conversation with your supervisor. I say there's two conversations, one with your supervisor, one with your supervisor in human resources. Imagine having that conversation and saying, oh, wait, I got to bring my mom or I got to bring my dad. That's not going to go over very well. So this is also a way, it's a way where you can start to learn how to do this. And it's a very forgiving way because it's what I call a low stakes way. You don't lose anything. You don't get into any trouble. You just come in and do the best that you can. And if it's, I'm not quite sure, my parents know this better, then, we can see about including them. But we try to make sure that the students know they don't have to. And then everyone ends up signing a release. We don't go, I take a verbal for that time. But then I tell the student, if you would like, and usually I'll wait or I'll encourage the student to come back when the parents aren't there. I'll say, okay, we have this release form that you can sign that will allow us to include your parents. You don't have to sign it if you don't want to. If you do, you can. If you want to think about it, you can. Just know that anytime that you want us to contact your parents, we're going to need one of these in advance. And we'll do it for a year, but we'll tell them that, even if like I've had some parents come in and say, isn't there a release that I have to sign? And the students are like, yeah, I'd like to sign the release. And I'll do that, but I make sure that the students understand that they can revoke that release at any time they want. And so there have been times where I have had students come back the next week. They're now they're living on campus. They come back and they say, that release, can you get rid of that? We get rid of it. We make a notation that the release was pulled, and then the release goes away, and that permission goes away. We try to tell parents, don't get upset if your students do that, because really it's their right as adults to do that. It's completely their right to decide who has this is considered their academic information, who has their academic information.
Sure. So just to wrap this up then, what I think I can summarize hopefully well is that this is an intake meeting, but it's not an interview. It's not like a college admissions interview where students need to worry that they might say something that would cause them to not be able to register or not get what they want. They can have coaching from parents. They should ask questions and also know they're going to get some information. It isn't an all one-sided conversation of question from you and answer from them, that they can come with their questions too. So absolutely. Hopefully they can, please go ahead.
So I also recommend that they take notes during the meeting, because oftentimes we'll go through like we have in this interview, we go through a whole lot. And there might be questions that they have later. There might be some things that they think they understand but aren't sure. So I tell the students, feel free to take notes. And then if you come back later, I usually end all of my meetings by saying, we've been through a lot. I expect you to remember nothing of what we just talked about. The only thing I expect you to remember is, and I give them a card, that my email is on here, my phone number is on here. You can call or you can email me and tell me you don't remember any of this, and we'll go back through it as many times as we need to in order for you to understand.
I think that's such an important point. I think, most of us need repeated access to information before we can fully take it in. And students should not be concerned about asking follow-up questions. And in fact, I would think that their disability services contact person would actually be delighted to know that they're thinking about things and have some more questions and make sure that they answer all of those. So is there anything else you think that students and their parents should know about these intake meetings?
No, well, yeah, make sure that if you know where you're going to school, do everything that you have to do in order to get your application in as early as possible, and see if you can go meet with the people to do your intake meeting early. So that way you can get all the information that you need up front, as opposed to coming in. Some people wait until the first week of classes. Well, that can be really, that's a difficult, that's not the best time to do it, because it's such a transitory time for students. Everything is brand new and it can feel chaotic, because not only are you in a new building or on a new campus with brand new people all around you, you might be living in a space that you've never lived in before. There's so much that's new to where it's easy to miss out on having your accommodations in place as soon as possible. So I would say go in as early as you can, and then ask all the questions that you can. If you're still not sure of where you're going to school, by all means contact the schools where that you might be attending, and you can ask up front, hey, can I talk to someone about what your process is? There's no reason why you can't do that. I know I've that's a big thing that I do in the summertime too, is I'll get people who are juniors in high school, them and their parents contacting me to find out about the following year, because they're considering coming to our campus. So by all means, ask all the questions. We're here to help, and we can't help if we don't know the questions.
Absolutely. And just to be clear too, for those who are watching with younger students, the actual intake meeting won't happen until your student is accepted to and enrolls at college. Perhaps it's Stanislaus State, and then registers. And so I do have a video up on my YouTube channel about how students get access. Again, you can see that. And also, following this little interview, I will put up a link to a resource that I offer for free on my website. It is a form that students can use to prepare for this intake meeting. Some questions that they can take notes on and have that available. This isn't a quiz. They don't have to be able to generate those answers straight out of their head. They can certainly prepare for those questions and bring notes. So you can download that for free on my website. Marvin, thank you so much. I'm hoping that this will be very helpful and allow students and their families to feel a little bit more relaxed about these meetings.
Thank you very much for giving me the time and allowing me to speak to your audience. So appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
To get a free download of the college accommodation request preparation form mentioned in this talk, go to bit.ly/COLLACCFORM.